People who work in adult stores, what is the dumbest thing you have found or a customer has done? Some guy tried to return a used item. We did not take returns because, well, come on. Do you want a refurbished sex toy? Ugh. Anyway, this guy started screaming at my manager over a $30 toy that his wife broke with her stuff and he wanted another one without paying for it. When my manager explained to him we don't take returns and would need him to pay for the new one, he threw the used one at my manager's head, which she managed to duck, grabbed the new vibe, and booked it to the door. My manager did the dumb thing and followed the guy out of the store while angrily yelling to the police on the phone. She planned to get the guy's license plate number to report him. He ended up trapping her in the front lobby by blocking the door with his foot while she is still reporting his description to the police. He then proceeded to grab her by the throat, throw her against the glass, then run out of the store with his new toy to where his wife was in the car, watching the whole thing and screaming for him to get in so they could go. Story 2. One afternoon, I saw a fistfight in an adult cinema. My local adult store had a small cinema out the back. I was a little drunk, so I paid my $5 and in I went. The place reeked of disinfectants. I walked in right as the fight was breaking out. A couple in their mid-40s had decided to duck in the cinema. When all the dudes in the cinema gathered round to watch, the husband didn't like the close attention. He started shoving the nearest guy, and they threw a few punches at each other as his wife yelled at them. The guy behind the counter came in and calmed things down. The couple left, and one of the peep show girls told the husband off, "If you duck in an adult cinema, of course, people are going to want to watch." The funniest part, though, one guy in the cinema didn't stop pleasure himself throughout the whole ordeal. Story 3. People pleasure themselves in the rentals room, people returning tapes smeared with lube and who knows what else. But my all-time favorite was when I ordered Chinese food delivered there, and this sweet little old man delivered it. He had never been in an adult shop before and was like in a candy store. He was asking what everything was and how it worked, and there was lots of laughter. Till we got to the sex toy wall, and he suddenly got furious. He pointed at this super small, realistic junk, think size of a finger, and he starts yelling angrily, "What is this?" I laughed and explained that men and women just have many strange tastes for toys. Awkward. Story 4. I remember a buddy of mine who went into an adult shop with a pair of calipers on hand to measure out the diameter of toys, mainly because he planned on using them as projectiles for his grenade launcher during airsoft games. Best part is he told the lady at the counter his intentions for the toy. She said that launching them will hurt like hell. He didn't believe it because he thought that can be changed by adjusting the CO2 pressure of the grenade shell. Let's just say after some extensive testing, shooting each other with it at different psi, we found out that getting hit by a sex toy will knock you off your feet and break a windshield of a car. Story 5. Just after I got out of the army in the late 70s, I worked at an adult theater running the projector, doing the lighting for the dancer, cleaning, and fixing crap. For the record, the sound system was the bomb for the day, and there was nothing as grand as cranking up Dark Side of the Moon after hours and tripping out while cleaning the place up. Anyway, aside from your usual run-of-the-mill creeps and weirdos, it was not uncommon to have couples come in and get frisky, almost always in the back rows. From the projection booth, you could see them clear as day. Most probably had no idea. Others were likely hoping to get caught. So, they hired this new kid, and I'm teaching him how the projection booth works. It doesn't take him long to realize he can see what's going on in the theater, and he takes to spending most of his free time sitting in the window where the spotlights are for the dancers. His third or fourth night there, a couple sits right under the window, gets naked, and starts doing dirty things. The kid spots them and takes his seat, then starts leaning out to get a better look. Fell right out the window. Funniest crap I ever saw. Story 6. My wife used to work at an adult store when we first started dating. She has lots of stories, both creepy and funny, but this is my favorite. The store she worked at was open until the bars closed, so she often dealt with drunks leaving the nearby bars. One night, a middle-aged guy walked in and was looking to rent a DVD. After asking my wife a few questions and putting on a super creepy vibe, he picks a couple dirty films to rent. While she is ringing him up, the guy starts inspecting some skimpy lingerie on display near the cash register. After a few minutes, he says, "You would look pretty good in something like this. Would you ever wear it?" Now, my wife has a really sharp wit and doesn't put up with much crap. So, without missing a beat, she replies, "Sir, if I wore that, my junk would hang out." The guy's eyes got real wide, and he just turned around and walks out, leaving his money and DVDs behind. Story 7. It was about 4:30 a.m. I was tired. I tilted my chair back and rested my head on the shelves. I would just rest my eyes a bit. No, of course I wouldn't sleep. There was no one in the store. Just when I started to drift off to dreamland, I hear a loud bang. My mind is trying to think of what could have made that huge noise. I open my eyes to see every sex toy in the store flying in the air. So, a pickup truck had slid through the intersection and slammed into the outside wall of the shop, the wall on which racks and racks of toys. I have never been more befuddled than in the first seconds after I opened my eyes. That's my favorite story. There are far many more gross ones. Story 8. I have a friend that works at an adult shop. One of the chilliest people I know. He's told us lots of stories. He frequently takes pictures of the weird stock they get in and shows it to us, as well as the dumb names of the movies they get in. The story that stood out the most was when he told us a couple came in. It was a guy at least 6'5" and a little girl in a sundress, of age, just small, no bigger than 4'10". They apparently asked for the largest sex toy in stock, bought it, and left. It was like Gangler 16 inches. Totally absurd. Story 9. Not me, but someone I knew who worked at an adult shop. One day, a lady came in and asked to see the balls, basically metal balls that you put inside. They were in a counter, and so he put them on top of the counter. She throws her leg up and puts one right in. Story 10. I had a customer passed out from some substances on the shift before mine, and my coworkers forgot that he was in the arcade. Later that night, while I was working and watching slasher movies to pass the time, I heard a noise in the arcade. No one has come in for 3 hours at this point. I'm freaked, but I have to go check it out. I go into the arcade with my flashlight and yell, "Anybody back here?" Out jumps this addict, naked and screaming. He runs past me through the fire exit and into the night. Scared me like no other time in my life. Story 11. Okay, story time. Had a friend that worked at an adult store in Canada. She told me this amazing story of a break-in they had. So they show up to work one morning and the glass door in the back has been smashed by a cinder block, so no alarms have gone off. The two that opened the store go to the security camera footage to see what happened. They start watching this skinny black kid no more, then 18 or so crawling through the hole he made in the glass. He walks around the store looking like he's looking for something and doesn't even head to the register. The guy goes straight to the ducking super expensive real doll section, grabs a bottle off the shelf and proceeds to duck 3 to 4 different toys, including a $600 doll. Guy does his thing, finishes up, and just leaves through the hole he made. Story goes, the cops recognized him and picked him up. A couple days later, because of the damage to the door and all the expensive crap he literally ducked up, they charged him with damages over $5,000. Story 12. I worked part-time in this video rental store that had adult film. The store was set up in a way that the children's movies were at the front, where you can see them from the street. Kids could even come in. The adult stuff was around a corner, 180 through a door, and you had to get past me first. Well, this also means that I do not have total view of the racks at all times, not even when I'm at the counter, which you have to pass to get there. There was a guy who would come in and finished on the covers of DVDs, then put them back in the shelf, but not up front, so you could see there was bodily fluids on it. He always put them in second or 3 deep, so you could only discover the trap by sorting through them. Ducker was eventually caught. Oh, I so wish I could have been witness to that, but it wasn't my shift. Most cliche thing about it, he wore a brown trench coat most of the time he came in. Closed up the front, like an exhibitionist from the movies. Oh, and the girl working there was shown a junk pic on a phone. The guy asked her if they had any film with junk like this. It was his own junk, with his shoes and his shirt, all of which he was currently wearing, on the photo. Story 13. I worked at a store that sold novelty items. Our stores also had a large selection of toys and lingerie. One day, we had a middle-aged woman come in holding a plush rabbit wrapped up in a baby blanket. She was wearing a new Adidas tracksuit with a torn-up robe over top of it. She came up to the counter and started telling us her husband owned the store. We were a corporation, so obviously no single person owned our store. She walked back to the back and proceeded to pick out the largest toy we had and wrapped it up in little baby bundle. My manager at the time saw this and walked to the front of the store to stop her while she was on her way out. We had a lot of theft, and most of the time, if we could just recover the merchandise, we would let them go. She stopped her and asked for it back, and the woman starts screaming about how her husband said it was okay to come in and take it, and that she needs that to get her baby back. She told us her husband and his new mistress stole her eggs and made a child with them, and they needed that toy, or else they wouldn't give the baby back. Needless to say, we ended up having to call the cops, and it was a big ordeal. When they arrested her and took her rabbit, she immediately started crying and screaming. They were taking her baby away, and she would get us all, because she knew what we were trying to do and because we supported the legalization of substances. We had a lot of things with plants on them in our store. Story 14. I worked in a crummy video store that was probably a tax dodge. Our main moneymakers were the children's section, and then, a distant second, the adult DVDs. This was mainly supported by one old guy who would shuffle in and rent the same DVD week after week, year after year, at least 200 or 300 rentals. The system didn't keep logs as far back as this guy had been renting the exact same adult DVD. He could have easily bought it 100 times over or stolen it long ago. We wouldn't have cared at all. And finally, the store is closing. The manager's like, your last paychecks are 99.9% going to bounce, so steal whatever you want now. Us, being nice, finally offer this gentleman the DVD to take home and keep. He refuses over and over till finally the manager writes him a letter rewarding him a free permanent rental due to his patronage, or some such. He cried. We certainly had more hardcore and/or explicit titles. I always wondered why he focused on that video. It was not a small town, but it was possible we were the only adult DVD store in that immediate area. Story 15. A friend in college worked at an adult bookstore, late 90s, early zeros. They had a rash of people renting tapes, recording over them with Back to the Future, and returning them. Lots of pissed off renters coming back with tapes adulterated to be unadulterated. Story 16. A friend of mine used to work in one. One of his coworkers used to ride of their bike to work and would often store it in one of the booths. They would clean these booths multiple times a day with gloves and bleach for obvious reasons. Well, my friend went to clean the booth where the bike was stored and proceeded to grab the bike handle while kneeling down to clean the floor, and his hand slipped off the handle. Some dude who had just been there lubed up the bike handle and was using it. Story 17. Found during a stock take a double-ended junk pump, which was pretty weird. Had a customer come in, I asked if I could help, and he said, "No thanks, I don't speak any English, I'm just here to get something for my brother." He grabbed the most expensive replica sex toy there was and paid cash, about $700. Had two Irish guys come in first thing in the morning. They'd been out all night, and my shop was the first place to open. They looked around for a bit, then one of them said, "Hey, you got somewhere here we can rack up some substances?" I was about to point them to the toilet when his mate punched him in the arm and said, "You don't be so duckin' rude. You asked the man if he'd like to have some substances with us." Closed up the shop, turned the security camera off, and they do substances on the counter. Story 18. I wouldn't call this a NSFW, but more so really funny, or it was to me at the time. I worked at a small video store back in college that had a family section downstairs and an adult section upstairs, mostly videos. But as time went on, we added to the adult section with toys and other interesting things. Well, this store was about 5 miles down the road from a military base, so more often than not, we had a lot of guys from the base who would frequent the store, picking up a few videos and things. Usually a few one-off guys by themselves, then every once in a while, a group of them would come in with a regular, usually looked like new guys that had just gotten stationed there. Well, one night we had a few of these guys come in for a few movies, nothing out of the ordinary, but more so just horsing around, looking for some time to kill and things. They settle up with me at the register with a handful of movies and stuff and start up some general chit-chat with me about how busy we usually were. Was there a lot of folks that came in for that kind of stuff? My typical answer usually at the time, "Oh yeah, man, all the time." One of them starts mouthing off about one of their superiors who they believe is probably a closet homosexual, just in his mannerisms, and other things they have noticed about the guy. Well, as they were about to turn and leave, guess who walked through the door? Yep, you guessed it. They all just kind of stand still in shock, politely move out of the gentleman's way, and then hustle out of the store as quickly as possible. Guy goes upstairs for a few minutes, comes back down with a few videos to a normal run-of-your-mill films, and then one labeled Big One. I, for the most part, unfazed at the time because I had seen it all, but more so because I had seen this guy come in as a regular and typically knew that he mostly stuck to traditional adult film, but was kind of curious about the other video. Needless to say, I look up and get ready to ask this guy. Really big black guy, huge ripped upper body. Reminds me of if Terry Crews and Ving Rhames, but Guy is a super cool nice guy. And he has the biggest crap-eating grin on his face and said to me, "Let's see if I can have a little bit of fun screwing with those guys tonight." I lost it. A few days later, he comes back and tells me left the video sitting out in plain sight for anyone to see later that night and has now had the time of his life intimidating his new guys. Tells me they all got super jumpy anytime they would be at attention, and he would walk up behind them and talk to them in their ears. Apparently, he told some of his officers about what he did, and now they are all in on the joke and running with it. Made my week. Story 19. I have been flashed many junks, and you'd be surprised at how many men pleasure themselves through their pants while browsing. But all the fun and gross stories come from our video arcade. Story 20. I have 2 stories from when I worked at an adult store in college. I was an avid reader, so I would bring books and comics in to read during the midnight shift. This was a 24-hour store. One time I was reading Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House when some guy came in and asked what I was reading. He looked at the cover, said, "That's weird," and went back to browsing toy at midnight. Now, where I live, there are weird laws about adult stores, one of which is that you can't have an adult store. You can only have clubs that sell adult items. So we got around this by selling a 50-cent membership card. I had a guy come in and give me a really hard time about the membership card because he didn't have one. I threatened to call the police and have him removed, so he relented. After he got his card, he commented, "I bet you think all of us gay guys are just after sex all the time." I thought it was weird. I hadn't said anything about his orientation, nor about any other customers. I replied, I don't know about all gay guys, but it's 3 a.m. and you're in an adult store, so. The funniest sale I ever made was to a young couple, guy and girl. They browsed it for a while, then came up to the counter with a double-ended toy thicker than my arm. It was expensive too. I remember the guy looked really excited by me making the purchase while the woman, not so much. When the day shift guy, who had worked there for years, came in, he took one look around the store and said, "Crap, you sold the behemoth?" Story 21. I have to use the classic, not me, but an ex-girlfriend. She worked at an adult store that also had a large video rental section. There used to be this guy who would show up, pick up movies, bring to counter, and then in broken English would ask the staff what the words were. Turned out he spoke perfect English and just got off on the girls saying dirty words. Story 22. Not me, but ex-girlfriend. Worked in a tasteful and adult store where an older heavyset man would often come in and take small thongs from the rack, put them on in a small dressing room, and walk to the ladies working there, hoping for a reaction. She was warned about him when she started working there. Story 23. Part-time job in college. Two things come to mind. First, a guy walked in saying he was literally just released from prison, and he wanted the most terrible adult film we had. All we had was slap-happy type stuff, and he compared that to Disney and left. The second was a paraplegic or something in a wheelchair that rolled in on his own. He asked where the trans section was. I went over there with him because he couldn't reach the movies and was putting the ones he wanted one by one in his lap. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally chose one and decided to pay by credit card. It required a signature. He couldn't reach or sign on the counter, so I had to hold the receipt flat on the movie he just picked, which was sitting on his lap. He then rolled out, stood up out of his wheelchair, chucked it in his van, and left. Story 24. Not much was NSFW. Just strange. I saw a kid I knew from middle school, a girl I knew from a therapy program, and my ex-boyfriend. Normally, I would just leave the people in the video section to find what they wanted because I don't know their preferences. But one day, an older woman wanted me to help her find some dirty film. A couple was walking up a video aisle, and the girl was loudly exclaiming, "I'd rather watch film with junks." When they later came to return the video, some DVDs could be rented, she came into the store barefoot. We had a group of guys come in who must have just gone out for drinks, but one of the men was asking about the average junk size and was going around asking if I'd seen junk the size of some of the toy. There were many people who came in to return items after we explicitly told them we don't take returns. Some brands of toys you can register online and get a replacement from the manufacturer. The worst return was the guy with the pump. He was intoxicated. He was talking about how he wanted to get a pump for his friend who couldn't come into the store. He buys the pump, gets the whole rundown of no returns. He leaves. 5 minutes later, he comes back and wants to return it. He tells us he went home and tested it, and it didn't work. There's no way that that could have happened. He used it in his car. If you're nervous about buying something at a shop, just remember that we have probably seen people come in looking for stuff that is weirder than what you are asking for. Story 25. Former men's club manager, sex toy salesman extraordinaire here. We had video booths and a theater as well as a full toy and video store attached to our club. I had just started at the club as a cleaner. This was around 11 p.m. on a Friday night. I had to do hourly checks of the booths to keep them clean and sanitary. I walk down the hallway and an older guy goes into a booth and I hear a buzzing start to come from it. This was not unusual. I get my supplies, start to clean, and make my way back down the hallway. Lo and behold, the door to the booth is open and the toy is sitting on the floor, still buzzing the duck away. I go back to the supply room to grab the dustpan and reevaluate my life choices. Come back to the booth and the ducking vibrator is gone. Good news for me. The guy forgot his toy and came back to grab it. I continue my cleaning and I hear the buzzing again. Now I'm thinking either we had two people in a row grab themselves a toy or my horny customer decided a change of booths for some reason. I'm all done except for this one booth at this point. I figure I'll clean the bathroom and then come back to that last booth. I do my cleaning thing, walk out, and there's a different guy coming out the booth. I heard the buzzing coming from. I stop for a minute as this guy walks out. My man saw a used one on the stained floor of a pleasure booth and decided it would be a great idea to take it and duck himself with it. I can't decide whether I want to cry or throw up or both. I do what a true professional does. Make sure my ducking gloves are on tight and go to clean this before I go eat a bullet. I open the door and there it is. The ducking toy, once again sitting on the floor. The theater was just a cesspool of filth and depravity. Story 26. A guy I used to work with got a job at an adult store called Quality Books. Of all things, a little hole in the wall. He said, the weirdest part was that this particular institution had booths in the back where people could preview the movies, except that in the booths, there was just a screen and 2 buttons, gay or straight. Also, the booths were in 3 rows of 2 with no curtain or anything between them. People bought tokens to go back into the back, which allowed them an amount of time. He said they got busiest around lunchtime when fellas would come in buy some tokens, and head back to the booths for a half hour or so. Also, there only being 6 booths, and didn't stop 8 or more fellas from being back there at a time on multiple occasions. Also, they sold poppers or film head cleaner, as I was told it had to be described when requested by the customers in order to allow them to buy it. If they said, "Gimme some poppers," they would be asked to leave. Not sure why the hang up on this one, considering the booths. Funny thing is, my buddy from work was the most normal guy, completely unfazed by the work he was doing, and always coolly referring to the customers as the pervs. One last tidbit. He once got a call from a guy, so asking if they had the new Harry Potter book. We're not that kind of bookstore guy. Story 27. I know some people who own a bar in southern Spain. One time a guy come in and asked to use the restroom. When they checked the restroom after he left, they discovered that he had been using the toilet brush to shove up inside. It was covered in crap too. It was the handle that he put up, not the actual brush. Story 28. Not me, but my brother owns an adult store, and he told me this story. Older lady comes in and tries to return a remote control toy saying it doesn't work. My brother, after putting on latex gloves, grabs the remote control and puts new batteries in it. With the fresh batteries installed, my brother presses the go button, and instantly the older woman lets out a moan and says, in what my brother called a old smoker's voice, "Oh yeah, it's working now." Story 29. I worked at a one-in as a freshman for the 2002 summer before internet adult film was adopted by the mid-late age crowd. We posted a public schedule of when which employee would work, and at least 20 people would call in each Sunday to check when 1 or 2 people would be working, which I found weird, but it's a great job for studying on the clock. I later learned they were the coworkers who would watch you pleasure themselves in the video booths for an extra couple bucks. I also got to make a great first impression on a lot of my professors. Story 30. My shining hour has arrived. I was working the night shift at an adult store in the 90s. A rather large woman walks in and goes straight for the toys. We had samples glued to the wall for folks to feel and size up. We had a pretty wide variety, some of them rather large. After fondling the large-sized toys with names like Bam and Big House, she comes up to the counter and asks rather politely if we had anything bigger. Internally, I'm like, what the actual duck? Some of those things are as big or bigger than a head. I then suddenly remember the Mr. Big Head we have in the back. A toy we had had on the wall for about a year and never even had a sniff at. We were about to send it back for a refund. This thing was insane, like the rim of a big gulp cup big. I hand it to her. She slaps this massive, vaguely shaped lump of plastic and silicone in her hand a couple of times, then smiles and giggles a bit. She says, and I will never forget this, "Yeah, this will do great." She then hands me like $300 and walks out. I swear she had a spring in her step. Story 31. A friend of mine works at an adult store and says that people go in the restrooms to try out items all the time. It's not something a lot of people do. There are just ass clowns here and there who think they can get away with that crap. Of course, they can't just clean the toy and put it back. That's nasty and illegal. Story 32. I wasn't a store employee, but worked for the coroner's office. Guy had a heart attack in the personal arcade pleasure booth and pass. We did the removal of his body, and all I could think about is how to notify the family with a professional demeanor. Still top 5 of my list of memorable deaths I was privy to. Story 33. I worked at a novelty store which also had a small 18+ section in the back. The only time I was ever seriously creeped out was when this guy came in late one night. Most Thursday nights were uneventful. I'd get to work after school. There would be a small rush from the kids coming in on their ways home, checking out all the music patches and stickers in the glass cases in the back. Maybe we'd get a person in to fill a bundle of balloons, a couple in browsing the pewter dragon statues, which surprisingly sold rather well. Or maybe it was just someone looking to buy a gag gift for someone that would ultimately get a laugh, and then go into the back of a closet. It was a rather routine shift, which consisted of a lot of BSing with the security guard, occasionally doing some bio or calc homework, and babysitting the store until it mercifully closed. Until that one night. I believe it was around 8:30 when he came in, brown coat extending almost down to his ankles. He was an odd guy, mid-40s, short dark hair, thick but not fat nor muscular, and hadn't shaved in a week at least. The store had a barricade of glass cases which surrounded the register area, which is where I would generally stay when working. It allowed me to have a good 360-degree view of the store, as well as have access to the TV monitor that illuminated the happenings of the adult area. I don't remember what it was, but the guys struck up conversation with me after he slowly walked through the store, looking at the aforementioned pewter dragon. At first, the conversation was just small talk. I'm by no means an extrovert, and being the tender age of 19 at the time, I was already nearing the end of my comfort zone after 5 minutes with the dude. But alas, he insisted on keeping conversation going, through the interruptions of the occasional customer, all the while slowly walking around the glass display cases, my barricades. I had a quick visit from the security guard, who I probably could have made mention of the guy to sooner, but I have a habit of giving the benefit of the doubt to people. So against better judgment, I let him keep talking. At some point, he made his way into the 18-plus area, commenting oddly on the items back there. I say odd because it wasn't like he was just laughing at the stuff, no. That would have been way too normal. He very much wanted me involved in the conversation. He seemed to have been enjoying keeping me roped in. I tried to let him know that I would be closing in 5 minutes when I saw the soon-to-be respite of the clock approaching. But 9 o'clock came and went, and there I was, still painfully talking to this man, with one eye on the monitor. He made his way back out of the area. I had not yet dared lock the doors, as I normally would if customers stayed past closing, for obvious reason. No, I stayed in my area, making sure I had some sort of object available to pick up, should it come down to it. To my relief, the man informed me at about 9:15 that he had to make a phone call. I politely refused to allow him to use our phone, as it was against company policy, so he went out to find a payphone, requesting I don't lock up yet because he'll be back. He left, and swiftly as he was out the door, was I there turning the lock. I turned back to take a look at the store, and to my horror, I saw one of the more disturbing displays of my tenure with this establishment. Smeared across all 4 sides of the display case was what I only assumed to be gobs and gobs of Vaseline. I made my way to the 18-plus section and found more of it covering a few of the toys, as well as a small toys box covered in Vaseline pollen, opened and emptied. Just about this time, I noticed the security guard making his rounds, albeit sooner than expected. I ran to the door, unlocked it, and called out, "Bobby, come over here." He got there and I explained the situation which had just unfolded. He informed me he had already picked up on it, which is why he was back so soon. He said he'd go try to find him, so I locked up again, cleaned all the crap up, called my boss to tell her what happened, then got the duck out of there. I never saw the guy again. Story 34. Oh, so many. I used to have a guy call up from a block number. Always a bad sign. I'm a lady and I answer the phone and it would go something like this. C. Hey, do you guys carry dirty cigarette cases? Me. No, I'm sorry we don't. C. Do you smoke? I'm looking for something for my daughter. She just loves to suck them down. How many packs a day do you smoke? Me. Hangs up. Not quite an SF, but bizarre. 2. Late one night, I'm the only employee on. A big stretch limo pulls up in front of the store. We're in a plaza sort of place. An older guy and a younger, beautifully dressed woman get out of the car. I can tell right away she's an escort. They're going around my little shop and looking at all the stuff. The guy has a big mouth, telling her all the nasty things he's gonna do to her. She just plays along. He wants her to try on lingerie, but we only have a tiny bathroom. He wanted to go in with her. I protested a little, so he throws a $100 bill on the counter. Now this is way more money than all the lingerie this chick wants to try on is worth, so I let them. Ended up with a $100 tip at the end of it all. 3. Also a late night one. A couple comes in, drunk and adorable. They can't keep their hands off of each other as they stumble around the store. In the front of our store, we had a section near our front window with lingerie. The couple stumbles into there, and the woman just starts do BJ the guy in the front window of the store. I tell them that everyone can see them. The guy tips me $20 to lock the door and let them finish having fun in the back of the store. It was an easy $20. And a free show, story 35. Had a dude load himself up with armfuls of crap, and as I was distracted talking to his accomplice, he started inching for the door. I was about to ask him to put the stuff on the counter when he booked it. I didn't give chase. I was too busy laughing at how goofy he looked, half waddle running out the door. Then I glared at the other guy, realizing he was still there. He offered some kind of, "Oh, me? With him? Man, anyway, peace," and left. Idiots. Story 36. On my first day, I watched a young dude return a used metal cage because the sound didn't fit in the cage properly and made him pain. My coworker then slapped gloves on and started trying to reassemble it to troubleshoot. A couple once left their children in a car alone to come shop. One of them ran into the store, which is illegal, yelling for his daddy. They were asked to escort their child out. I've also had customers offer me substances on the job. I regret nothing about getting into this field. Story 37. Typical, never worked at an adult store, but had a friend that did. Used to laugh at the stories she'd tell. Used return attempts. Guys wanting refunds on the vid booth because they paid for more time than they needed. The mismatched purchases. Tiny girls buying the largest toys known to man. Bigger girls buying Tic Tac sized toy, etc. The strangest those was the stories she'd tell about, I'm gonna call him Gary. Gary wasn't a guy. Gary was a girl addressing and pretending to be a guy. Now my friend was gay, so she knew other girls that did this. What made Gary strange was he was an idiot. Gary was the type to openly pleasure himself through his pants while browsing. Gary had to be talked to multiple times about hitting on other customers. Gary liked to leave his pants unzipped. Gary was apparently bad at binding his breasts, so from time to time, the bindings would come loose entirely, or one boob would work free. Gary apparently had a very nice rack. My friend's words, not mine. I loved it when she came over, and I got a new Gary story. Apparently, he spent so much money, they just dealt with him. Plus, he was mostly harmless. She just couldn't figure out if he was role-playing as douche for some sort of gratification, or if that was really that kind of guy he wanted to be. She said it was like performance art. It was so confusing. Story 38. So many. But the one that sticks out to me is this couple that came in one day. Not necessarily NSFW, but it just got so weird. So I'm working my shift at a higher-end adult store when this couple comes in. A guy and a chick, goofing off, as per usual. Nothing too out of the ordinary. They both seem a little rough around the edges and are slightly stumbling around, but people often come into the shop a little buzzed. The guy's picking up the floggers we have on display and asking if she likes it. She picks up toys, asking if he would enjoy using them on her. Really nothing too strange for a sex shop yet. But then I notice the guy starting to act weird. His demeanor changes completely. He starts acting very paranoid and starts walking in and out of the store, telling his girl, let's go, I'm ready to go." He walks in and out of the door probably like 15 times. She isn't ready to leave yet and follows him outside, where I can only assume they argued big time, because when they come back inside the shop, they were very hostile towards one another. She told him to duck off, leave me alone. You are such an idiot. He stormed off again and was gone for about 15 minutes while the girl kept shopping around. Suddenly, he sneaks back into the store and starts following this girl around. It was a fairly large store. It was super creepy, and at this point, I was very uncomfortable being around them. I stopped to ask the girl if she's aware that her boyfriend is back and is following her, to which she says, "What? Who is following me? I came here alone." I gesture towards the guy she came with, and she says, I don't know him. Why is he following me?" She seemed authentically scared that some unknown man was following her. Other customers caught wind of what appeared to be an abusive relationship and asked the girl if she needed a ride somewhere, away from this man. I also offered to call her an Uber if she was in an unsafe position. She continued to state that she didn't know who he was, but she didn't need anyone's help. So finally, she chooses her toys, comes up to the register, and I begin to ring her up. One more time, I ask her if she needed any help, to which she very calmly stated, "Oh, don't worry about it, that's just my brother." Then they go outside together and are gone into the night. Living through that scenario was just so strange. Also, there was a time someone grabbed a realistic toy, shoved it up inside, and walked out. We considered that toy like a pet and called him Little Richard, so all of my coworkers and I were sad when he left us. Story 39. My wife tells some weird crap she saw in her time as a cashier, clerk in an adult store. 1. People ducking in the middle of an aisle. When cops came to remove them, they replied, "But we thought it was okay because they do it on reality movies all the time." 2. Gay couple coming in to buy The Great American Challenge. Guy number 1 made a joking comment about the size of the toy compared to his partner's member. Guy number 2 took great offense, tore the toy out of the package while his partner was paying, and swung it like a baseball bat full force at gay guy number 1's head. Gay guy number 1 slams his head down hard on the counters, promptly knocked the duck out. Gay guy number 2 runs out of the store in tears, large toy still in hand. 3. Incredibly large black transsexual walks into store, proceeds to grab large display toy and a display pump, walks to cashier and says, "How much for those?" Cashier awkwardly replies, it's $100 for both." Transsexual woman throws phone on the counter and starts walking out. Cashier says, "But it's only $100. Transsexual woman replies, "Hun, I do whatever I want," in the most sassy way possible, complete with moving her head side to side. 4. Guy was decently dressed and pretty sure he had a gun on a holster under his arm. Guy disregarded clerks and finished his work, dressed the wound, and left. I refer to this encounter as the time I met Jason. 5. Guy walks in wearing an actual cow skull mask and a robe. Walks around store, doesn't buy anything. Clerks are freaked out. Guy leaves shortly after. 6. A bunch of furriers walking in costume and buying a bunch of assorted sex toys, one of which was a gigantic tentacle that was only there for decorative purposes. It didn't have a price tag. It wasn't on the records. It was made of a hard, heavy rubber, weighed at about 50 pounds, and came up to my chest. Nobody was even sure it was actually fit for human use. Even the manager assumed it was prop from a movie the owner had placed there as a joke. The thing was the same girth as a fire hydrant at its base, tapering to the thickness of a large adult arm at the top. Still, one of the furriers, a very small woman dressed like a cat, insisted on paying whatever we asked for it. Manager set the price at $5,000 as a joke. technically it belonged to the owner. She took it. As they are leaving, I overheard her say to her friend, "I think I'm going to need some kind of ladder to get up on this." 7. Guy walks in for no reason other than he was bored at home and figured people at a shop would make for interesting conversation. Ends up becoming friends with everyone and played Doom 3 with the manager on a laptop. Story 40. It was a normal morning of a few rental customers, but otherwise not much activity yet. My coworker and I were rather bored as all our cleaning and organizing had been completed. Pretty sure we were talking about the new Pirates toys that had came in a few days prior. The door jingles and in walk a couple. The man was not hesitant at all about walking in. However, the woman was. She was partially hiding behind his back, nervously glancing around like she thought a sex toy was going to jump out at her. When she saw my coworker and I, both women, behind the counter, she seemed to relax a bit. Her boyfriend grabbed her hand and dragged her over to the high-priced toy cabinet and started talking to her about what he wanted to get her. My coworker and I stopped paying much attention at that point, as he obviously had been in before and knew to ask for help. She was nervous, but it got much worse as he then started to go farther into the store. While the high-priced toys are up front, the farther you go back, the more exotic the toys get. While you start with the cutesier, almost novelty toys, it ends in items like the American Challenge and a full hand and fist. She started muttering that she really shouldn't be in there when they started at the toys wall. It got louder and interlaced with, "I'm a good Catholic girl, this is wrong." Not the first time this has been said in the store, so I don't pay it much attention. What I didn't expect was when she reached the American Challenge, it's giant, it's purple, and can be quite a shock. It has never, however, pushed someone to hysterics. She started panicking and crying and fanning her face. Why would someone do that? That is so wrong. Story 41. Forgive me for any mistakes on grammar or punctuation. I worked at a very popular Midwest chain of adult stores in downtown Cleveland, so I was used to the weirdos. It wasn't unusual to work alone, especially on a Sunday. The day this happened was a Sunday and game day, so everyone was at the bar next door watching the Browns lose. On game days, we were dead aside from the drunks coming in to giggle, so I stayed in the back office watching cameras and texting. A younger man came in, so I came out of the office to greet him. I gave the usual, "Hello, welcome to so-and-so, is there anything I can help you with today?" The dude looked pretty grody, and I just thought a homeless guy asking for the bathroom or something. But the minute he sees me, he comes almost charging at me, rambling about something until he gets about a foot away. He then asks about our adult film selection, which was right next to me. I pointed and took it as an opportunity to walk away towards it and get space in between us. But he follows and stands as close as possible, asking if we have terribly adult film. I was getting scared because he was obviously on something, very aggressive in his body language and questioning, but at the same time trying to be nice. I have no doubt he could have overpowered me, so I started walking towards the front counter as he follows me, still talking, and I'm just wishing someone would walk through the door, but nope. He stays another maybe 5 minutes, and I'm waiting with my hand on the panic button. All of a sudden, mid-sentence, he just bolts. I ran to the back to text my husband and manager, and the next door bar manager comes to check on me because he saw the guy leave and was worried. Apparently, the guy was high on something and was causing a scene somewhere else before going to the bar and starting a fight with him and leaving. He had called the cops, but they took their time coming and arrested him down the street from the store. I left soon after. The story sounds tame, but in person at the moment, I was scared as hell. Story 42. I was desperate for a job, so I took a full-time job at a Christie's Toy Box, Midwest shop. The whole damn place is NSFW, so I'll just post funny little anecdotes about the job. A purple raspberry-shaped plug, aptly named Asberries, teaching a full-grown man trying to buy a toy for his wife. What it was and why she would want to be stimulated there, believe me, he didn't know. Or this dude was an Academy Award-winning actor. He ultimately didn't believe me and bought a cheap plastic non-vibrating toy, helping a lesbian couple pick out a sex toy. I was opening boxes and letting them hold the feel the rubber of the toy so they would know the quality. Yes, it's a thing. They had narrowed it down between 2 toys. One of the ladies held a toy in each hand and with a serious face began shaking them vigorously. About 10 seconds of serious shaking and she burst out laughing, realizing she was in a shop, flopping toys in each hand. They were hilarious and bought both of them. So many men picking out terrible things for nervous partners. No, Dave, your wife doesn't want a double-ended glass toy as her first sex toy, you dumbass. People trying to return sex toys. Yes, the double-ended glass was an attempted return. Watching a couple blatantly steal, but were funny as duck the whole time they were doing it. I wasn't allowed to intervene, so I just pretended not to notice. They took their loot, offered me met, and left. 2 final, and probably the most NSFW things that lead to me quitting. 1, a guy pleasured himself in his truck in our parking lot while his distressed dog watched. Broad daylight too, had to call the cops too. A customer began to flash me pictures of his junk from his phone. I talked to my manager and personally told the guy it wasn't appropriate, but he wouldn't stop and kept showing up more frequently. I am a small woman. They would have me work alone until midnight with no backup, even though this was happening. The shop was located next to a bar and a series of truck stops as well. I'm sure no one would hear me scream. I quit ASAP. I was sad because it was an easy job and liked helping people explore or discover their sexuality. Story 43. I worked at a popular shop in Philly. The front end was more the novelty stuff, bachelorette party items, and edibles, etc. The back had the videos, toys, furniture, and more. We all rotated cashier, restocking, and security duties throughout the week. And that day it was my turn to be security. Most nights that meant keeping kids out of the back half of the store, and not much else, but today was different. I had just finished helping a customer who was trying to discreetly buy some toys when this guy kept interrupting me to show me a position book and inquire if I could do X, Y, and Z. I told him if he wanted some assistance, that I could help him find the product he was looking for in just a moment. He would not leave me alone. And finally, I asked him to leave me alone, and that 1, yes, I could do X, Y, and Z, and 2, he would never see me do any of them. So 3, either buy the book or leave. This guy proceeded to yell at me, throw the book at my chest, turn and dart towards the door, but not before he grabbed a handful of the single-size lube packets and shoved them in his mouth. I just looked at my manager with the, "What do you expect me to do about that crap?" look, to which my manager demands that I stop him. To put this in perspective, my manager is a larger, almost 6-foot-tall guy. I am a 5-foot-tall girl. I did what I thought was best. I demanded he stop and spit out the lube packets, and when he didn't, I ran at him and spider-monkeyed onto his back to tackle him. He goes down, and all of the lube is popped out of his mouth except the cinnamon fire one, which busted, and he's now yelling that his mouth is on fire. We called the police. They charged him for shoplifting and harassment. I didn't get charged for the tackle because the cops said they were impressed. That incident always made me wonder why anyone would want to steal lube and why any lube company made a cinnamon fire lube in the first place. Maybe not the most NSFW, but it was my most memorable, non-creepy story from there. Story 44. So many stories. Was the guy who climbed on top of the arcade booths to watch other guys. Then there's a biological mess footprint on the ceiling. The guy who thought it was funny to break open glow sticks and leave condoms laying around filled with glow stick juice. The naked guy I found standing in the hallway with 2 double-ended toys. The drunk woman who asked to use the bathroom and ended up do BJ Five Guys while her husband was shopping. Hubby was pissed. Or the day I came in to find a door ripped off its hinges and blood everywhere. Guys that were there at the time said a married guy was just there to watch movies and picked up both without a hole. Story 45. As a rite of passage for a friend, we went to the local and adult store. While we were there, I discovered I knew the cashier from school and went to talk to her. I look over and the cashier friend points at another friend as he approaches these 2 girls looking at toys. "I bet he doesn't know they are lesbians. They're in here every week," she said. "Let's just see where this goes." My friend finally works up the nerve to talk to these girls and asks, "So, do you finish here often?" They laughed at him, and he looked mortified. They left and he came up to us. Cashier friend looks at him and says, "Pick your battles. If 2 girls are holding hands in this store looking at sex toys, they might not be in your ballpark." Story 46. I managed a video store that rented adult movies in a separated back room. One Sunday afternoon, I was making space for the new release Normal movies that were to come out the following Tuesday. It was a slow day and there were only 2 customers in the store. The one male went to the back room. I proceeded to make space and found myself at the part of the wall where I was directly on the other side of the adult room. Then I heard it, a friction, repetitive, steady noise I immediately identified as someone pleasure. I calmly walked to the front counter where we had a monitor for the cameras back there, thinking, "Oh no, please tell me I'm not about to witness what I think I'm going to see." Sure enough, the guy in the back room has his little friends out, nonchalantly tugging away as he walks around the room looking at the back of several DVD boxes. I didn't know what to do, so I walked back to where I was standing before, pounded on the wall, and said, "Hey, you do realize we have cameras here, right?" Long pause. Then the dude says, "Yeah." I'm thinking homeboy's going to be so embarrassed that he'll just leave right away. But no. He and his girlfriend, who was in the store also, proceed to look around the rest of the store for movies for like 20 more minutes. When they finally came up to the counter to check out, I could not look at the dude. I was so embarrassed for him. But he and his lady were super chill and were acting like nothing at all happened. Granted, the lady was not in the adult room at the time, so probably had no idea what was going on. But I was sick to my stomach. So they check out like 7 random non-adult movies and leave, and I'm kicking myself for not calling the cops. I didn't want the guy to get arrested for public pleasure, but I also didn't want the negative attention on the store. Like, who wants a story in the newspaper about public pleasure at the store they manage? Here's the kicker. A couple weeks later, the same dude that was doing the deed shows up to the store to fill out a job application. He stands at the counter the whole time he's filling it out, asking me questions about the app and if we are hiring immediately, etc. The freaking nerve that guy had. Story 47. Mayo guy. I was there for several years and have a good eye for when someone's pulling a prank or ducking with me. This guy was not pranking me. We had customers who would show up to the store or call us and make us a part of their fetish against our will. I don't give a duck what you are into as long as it's legal. I will respect you and professionally help you with whatever you want and give you advice. I am not judgmental. It is not cool, however, when you come in and forcibly make us a part of your sex life. Don't come into the store with a damn sex toy up and harass the girls who work there about how much you love taking it up and tell them about what you are doing. If that's your thing, that's awesome. Find some people who share your fetish and make your dreams come true. Mayo guy came in dressed like a linebacker who shops section for clothing and starts asking to see the sex toy. He starts sniffing them and lovingly moaning and talking about how his favorite lube of choice is mayo and how much he wants to slather up one of these and stick it. He didn't even buy anything. Please always wash your toys before using them, people. Weirdos might have touched and sniffed them. Story 48. Back in freshman year of college, I got a job as a manager for a GameStop-like store. The guy who was the supervisor there also worked at a store in the next plaza. So he always had stories to tell or invite us over sometimes after we close up to have a few beers with him in the office. One night, my friend and I were closing up and he calls the game store. He said we had to come right away to check something out. We rushed over there full of anticipation. He was waiting by the door for us. He let us in and locked the door behind us. He took us to the cinema area. It's a big warehouse-like place with a screen, plastic chairs, Kleenex, and a big trash can. So we walked through to the cinema area, and to our surprise, the chairs were all formed in a circle. To the side, the trash can was flipped upside down. On top of it stood a midget calling out bets, a bunch of biker dudes standing around holding out their money. And in the middle of the circle were two midget chicks wrestling. My friend said these midgets showed up with all these bikers and told him to shut down the store. They're going to have a wrestling match. He obviously got fired the next day, but that crap was way bizarre. Story 49. I used to work in an adult store. At the time I was still living at home, and parents thought I was working in a shoe store. Well, one day I was working the door checking IDs of people who came in when who of all people but my parents walked through the door. I had to check their IDs too. What's funny is that they were divorced when this happened, but I was too mortified to ask them what they were doing shopping there together. Dad made me quit. Oh, the hypocrisy. Story 50. Adult shop customer here. One of the Marines at my command, we're a joint command, I'm in the Navy, was getting out and going home. So for his going away party, we decided to get him something special. See, his nickname in the shop was Wiener Warrior, because he always made jokes about big green junk of the Marine Corps. I went into a local shop, not on uniform, that would probably have been bad, and asked for two of the most realistic-looking ballless toy they had. I gave the person working there very specific details. They needed to be firm, preferably with a battery compartment that had a screw-on cap. I found a pair, and she asked if I would mind telling her what they were for, because most customers didn't come in with such a specific set of criteria like that. I told her about my Marine buddy and the jokes he would make, then told her we were going to make him a set of toys nunchucks, since he was the Wiener Warrior. She stared at me for a half second, then said, "That is the single greatest reason I've ever seen someone come into this shop." She gave me a military discount, and within 24 hours, there was a set of junk chucks in a wooden box lined with velvet. Best going away gift I've seen in 6 years in the Navy. I'm pretty proud of it. Story 51. Worked at an adult novelty store. Let's see. I've seen my fair share of burritos, tacos, and titties. Had a girl ask me what size her piercing looked like. I don't know why, but so many people love to show me their piercing. Best one, had a guy come in and buy a plug. While he was purchasing it, he was acting very strange. It was clear he was on something, not too uncommon for that store in that area though. He then proceeds to insert this one into what I can only assume. I protested, but really he was high, his mind was made up, and I knew there was no stopping him. Plus, I'm a girl, was all alone. And at the time, what was I really gonna do? He starts talking nonsense and tries to leave, only he's not doing a very good job. Suddenly, he falls over and passes out. I go and nudge him with my foot, and he just groans at me. I call security and the cops. He comes to as the cops come walking in and yells at me for calling the cops. I explain to them what happened and tell them there is a plug inside. One guy looks at me confused while the other guy just laughs, filled out a police report and banned him from the store. Story 52. Not me, but a friend of mine used to work as a rent-a-cop. Our local adult shop reopened in a new building and had a grand opening type thing going on. They happened to bring in Ron Jeremy for the event. At first, it was just a little weird talking to him while there's literally TVs behind him, and there are money shots going on. Weird, but didn't faze him much. The part that pushed him over the top was when two different women came into the store to duck Ron Jeremy. One, an indigenous woman who looked like she lived on the streets, and the second one was a decent-looking girl. It wasn't the fact that they had sex with him, but each time he came back from the back room, he was eating an egg salad sandwich. Story 53. One of my friends used to work in an adult store in Canada, and here's the gem she told me a few weeks ago. One day, a man in a full arm cast came into the store looking for a product called The Arm, which is essentially an arm-shaped toy from what I understand. My friend claims she didn't usually remark on people's appearance of purchases, but for some reason she said something along the lines of, "Ha, I bet you really need this arm since yours is broken." The man looked at her, made her promise not to judge him, and told her what happened. Apparently, this man was having sex with his partner, and they decided to partake in dirty play. Before this guy knew it, he was elbow deep and they were having a grand old time. Suddenly, this man's partner has to sneeze and proceeds to do so while his partner is elbow deep. Unfortunately, the sneeze broke this man's arm in 3 different places, hence the arm cast and purchasing the arm. He told my friend that he will never use his own arm again. Story 54. I managed an adult store for over a year. Small stores, so usually only ever one girl working at a time. One dude comes in one night, wanders around a bit, then asks me to point out the male G-string. I do. He asks to try one on. No. So he buys it, then wants to put it on in the change room. Sure, dude, whatever. It's yours now. Shouts for me that he needs my help. I politely refuse, so he decides to come out and model it for me anyway. Think Oscar Nunez stripping for Sandra Bullock in The Proposal. 2. Another night, a guy comes in and starts trying to chat me up. He asks me some questions about the blow-up dolls, then tells me he'd love to watch me inflate one, that he's willing to pay. He literally sprinted out of the store when another couple entered to shop. The propositioning wasn't really that irregular because apparently girl working in an adult store will worker, right? A coworker of mine and I did get to watch the entirety of Pirates 2 twice and get paid for it though. So it wasn't all bad. Story 55. Didn't work at one, but while in Budapest on leave from a tour of duty, a married buddy and I who were not willing to be cheaters and partake in the physical comforts of a local lady opted to visit a Hungarian adult video store and try out the video booths separately. I asked for a video featuring girl on girl, had to be Hungarian actresses because Hungarian women are hot, and my buddy asked for anything with women. Apparently it did. He walked out and waited for me outside the store, trying not to burn the place down with me inside. Here's what happened to me. I had a great video, but before the feature started, had to sit through some previews of some really weird but not illegal crap that I'm just not into. The weird and my level of intoxication at the time prevented me from any enjoyment, but I really had to piss. Story 56. I worked as a book mender in a university library, not an adult store, but we did have a generous selection of books on photography, and many of them featured nudes. I regularly received books that had to be repaired, replaced, because the pages were all stuck together with bodily fluids. The thing is, the books had not been checked out. Dudes were either pleasuring the stacks or taking the books to the bathroom, ruining them, and then returning them to the shelves for others to enjoy. Definitely the grossest part of an otherwise interesting job. Story 57. I work in an adult store. I don't know how NSFW this is, but my store doesn't take anything back. We don't buy from the general public. We don't do exchanges or store credit for anything. One morning, while my coworker was on a bank run, store has us work in pairs, a guy comes into the store with a massive armload of used dirty mags. He walks up to the counter and puts them on the counter and walks out. I say, "Please don't leave those here. We can't accept them," as he walks out. I spend the next couple minutes dumping the old used adult magazines into the garbage and sanitizing the counter. Story 58. I wasn't working at the time. I was third shift, but during the day, a group came in with a baby in a stroller. They hid a few Halloween costumes in the stroller and tried to steal them. An employee stopped them, and they took the baby out of the stroller and left. But then one came back in and sprayed pepper spray in the employee's face. The police took the stroller for evidence. There was also the guy in the powder blue suit who had vomit down his back. He camped out in our bathroom for about an hour before we asked him to leave, and he asked us to call him a cab, which we did. And they wouldn't take him where he wanted to go, so he asked us to call him an ambulance. So here I am on the line with a 911 dispatcher who's asking me if I can do mouth to mouth if necessary. Oh, I guess, if I have to. And cops show up within like 90 seconds. Dude can't keep straight if he has chest pains or stomach pains. The ambulance hung out, scaring all the customers away for like an hour. And the NSFW part is that the bathroom stunk for like 3 weeks after he was in there. Story 59. This is pretty tame, but I used to work in a video rental store that had an adult section. This was circa 2005, and it wasn't too popular, but we'd still have the occasional customer wander in. One day, that customer happened to be a fellow classmate of mine. I had attended school with him since elementary school, but he was a bit mentally challenged. In school, he'd become upset very easily and hit himself. Either he bravely approached me or didn't recognize me, but he asked me if we had adult film. I had no idea if we did or if it was even legal. So I went back in there with him and searched for this hardcore illegal film. Came up short, but I didn't want to upset him, so I suggested another film and he took it and went on his way. Adult store employees. What are some interesting stories people have given when buying toys, equipment? Story 1. I had a husband come in looking for a sex toy with an extra long handle. He kept insisting longer, 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 whenever I showed him a model. So I finally asked, why the necessity of length? He told me his wife had really let herself go and he needed a long handle, so he wouldn't have to get too close to her. Story 2. I had a guy who would come in once every 2 weeks or so. He would buy around 10-20 movies and not much else. At least one of the movies would always be a one from our gay section, which always prompted him to explain he was from a state where you couldn't buy adult film legally, so he would buy it for multiple friends, one of which happened to be gay. I didn't really care and always just said something like, "That's nice." The best sale I ever had was a man who bought a few movies, a couple toys. His ticket came to about $1,300. It was right at the end of the night. I helped him carry it to his car. He left and I closed up for the night. The next day, my manager asked about the sale and I told him the story. He informed me the man called and said he bought a couple movies and that was it, and demanded the rest of the charges be removed from his card. He said it was probably a bad case of buyer's remorse. I still got my commission and never heard about it again. Story 3. One sticks out in my mind. We had a woman in her 60s, 70s that came in and bought an excessive amount of DVDs. They were all different kinds too. I was so caught off guard I started talking to her about free sites, but she said her son prefers DVDs. I must have given her an odd look, so she elaborated and said her son was mentally challenged and had been inappropriate behaviors in the past, so she bought him the movies and no more incidents. I didn't believe her until she came back in a week later with her son. I spent the next 2 years seeing them every 2 weeks or so. She started coming in and handing me cash and would go sit in the car while he made his selection. He was nonverbal, and I'd have to help him pick out the movies and filter for anything that looked particularly aggressive per her request to me. I eventually started keeping DVDs to the side for him and would give him the free promotional DVDs and sample lubes we'd get. Story 4. I used to work at an adult novelty store. We sold all sorts of things from SFW stuff like jewelry and masks to NSFW stuff like 2-foot-long double-sided toys. Most folks didn't find the need to make an excuse for what they were buying. There were 3 types of customers. We would have the regulars, usually men in their 60s or older, who would come in for a few DVDs and some pills. They don't talk much, in and out. We would get the college kids in for a laugh. They'd wander around the store for an hour, touching everything, and usually leave without buying anything. If they did buy, it was always a gag gift. Then there were the professionals, either performing queens, dancer. They were my favorites. They were kind, polite, and always knew exactly what they wanted. Story 5. My first wife used to sell sex toys. She'd go to conventions with other sex toy sellers and distributors. One of the sellers had a market surrounded by 3 colleges, one of them Ivy League. She said that she had so many college-age women who didn't know how anything worked down there that she started carrying pamphlets for Planned Parenthood. So, this is your body, 12 facts about your cycle, and other honest-to-goodness educational materials. Women would ask her medical questions, and she'd have to explain what a gynecologist was for. "Honey, I just sell glowing toys shaped like tentacled dinosaurs. You need to ask a real medical professional these questions." Story 6. The reason the employee thought we were there was more interesting than reality. I went to a store with a longtime friend of mine. We were looking at lots of different stuff. She was deciding what she wanted, and I pointed out an uncommon item that my college friend had. It was this little spinning pointed roller wheel, and I explained to my friend what it did, what it felt like on my arm. Well, my friend decides on her purchases, and we head up to the register. While up there, somehow our significant others, both them, came up in conversation. The cashier was surprised and explained to us that she thought the 2 of us were a couple and planning on having a group sex with the college friend I had talked about. She was very supportive of whatever we were purchasing for, and we all got a funny story out of it. Story 7. I worked at a hospital, but the story is NSFW, and he was using a sex toy. As an x-ray tech, I saw several weird x-rays. One in particular was an action figure inside. As I handed him the x-rays, he says, "Well, I'm sure you saw the x-rays and have questions." Well, I was playing in the bathroom and slipped, and I fell right on the thing. I remained silent, but my first thought was, why are you playing? Story 8. Not me, but a buddy of mine worked at a shop for a few years a long time ago. He's got tons of stories, but my favorite one was when he was working and this older guy came to buy a bunch of gay videos. I told you it was a long time ago. After the guy paid, he left and went home, called the store and asked for my friend by description. My buddy answered, and the guy said he'd give him $40 for his underwear. I asked him, well, what the hell did you do? I stripped those gits off in the bathroom, threw them in a plastic bag, and gave them to that idiot for $40. He never saw the guy again. And he has some more awesome stories about other people, but I always like this one. Story 9. So dude worked at a smaller video rental store back in the day where they didn't have enough staff to have someone watching just the adult section, which was separated off into its own restricted room. They had had a lot of trouble with people going in there, seeing that they were alone and basically pleasure to the box covers. So they installed a security camera and an intercom/PA system so that whoever was working the front could keep an eye on things and tell people to knock it off if they tried anything funny. Well, one day, our dude was working the front when he caught somebody acting suspicious on the cam. When pervert looked around and started reaching into his pants, employee hit the pay button and yelled, "Put it down!" Pervert jumped out of his skin when suddenly the voice rang out of nowhere, telling him to put the adult film down, and he went tearing out of there like a scalded dog. Story 10. Customer here had an awkward conversation with the poor gal behind the counter. I was looking for a good male massager, but wanted to know if she had any good recommendation. I was previously ripped off through some recommendations online that turned out to be cheap Chinese pieces of junk, the product pages artificially bolstered by botnets and fake reviews. The most pleasure the device gave me was the comedy gold of its English instruction booklet. So I wanted a human's perspective, somebody who actually handles these kinds of things on the daily, something that won't die after a month. I trust your judgment over internet reviews. Tried a couple recommended products online and got burned both times. Oh wow, she reels in surprise. I'm sorry to hear that. Did you have to see a doctor? If there's one thing I love about shop workers, they have a fantastic way to not make me feel like the most awkward person in the room. Bless her heart. I was tempted to leave them a 5-star Google Guides review using my real email address to really emphasize how grateful I was. Story 11. At an auto shop in a sketchy neighborhood, one of my employees used to leave his windows down all day when parked on the street despite repeated warning. No idea how he never lost his radio. I finally came up with a diabolical plan to rid him of this habit before he suffered a theft and passive-aggressively blamed the workplace. Tasked my manager with stopping at an erotic store right along her way, with purchasing the cheapest blow-up doll you sell for a prank. Got a real beauty for under $20, with printed-on fishnets and an undignified-looking mouth. Next afternoon, I poked an air hose out the side of the building and blew her up, then went to carry her across the street through a bunch of cars waiting at the signal. Everyone looked on with interest and amuhat as I pantomimed, "Shh," and settled her into the driver's seat of his car. Then I went back in and with mock seriousness said, "Monty, there's a lady in your car." He already suspected something fishy, so he wandered out with no special urgency in his step as everyone else followed to watch. It was hilarious watching him try to deflate her as quickly as possible, squeezing and pushing in variants of spooning and the Heimlich maneuver while another wave of signal waiters enjoyed the spectacle. Then he did the march of shame back, trying to look angry with me without success. He never did leave his car open and unlocked again though. Story 12. I've worked at an adult shop for the last 5 years. If the customer feels the need to make an excuse for what they're buying, it's rarely an interesting one. Usually they say it's a gag gift, but some of the bigger toys are over 100 USD, so it would be a lot of money to spend for a gag. I always tell them once they pay for it, I could really care less what they do with it. The one time I did care was when a really weird guy came in saying he wanted a huge one to revenge his wife with because he had caught her drinking sheeting. I told him I wouldn't sell him anything if I thought he was going to hurt someone with it, and he left. I like to pride myself on making the customer feel as comfortable as possible. I would never shame someone for their preference. First, because I'm not an a-hole, but also because that's just going to cost me sales. So whatever the customer is looking for, I'm here for it. Story 13. I think I may have actually embarrassed the clerk last time I went down to Yeolda Romantic. I needed a new toy because mine had died like 6 months ago. I was deliberating trying something different for like 10 minutes before I said duck it and got the same model I liked. I got up to the register and she checked it all out and offered to me to test it myself. "Oh no, I'm good. I've owned this model before," I said as she put her own hand against the surface and immediately had an "oh crap" expression. The low setting is the only one I use, but some people used to really weak vibrations are probably shocked by it. She asked if anything else had piqued my interest. I said, kind of. I think I'm just kind of happy with this one though. My old one lasted 2 years before the motor burned out. She was clearly holding in giggles and definitely laughed as she offered me my receipt and was red in the cheeks. Like, Miss Lady, why are you working in an adult shop if comments of that caliber are enough to make you snort? Story 14. One day my girlfriend and I were horny, and our fingers could only do so much. Since I had recently moved to a new state, I wasn't quite as familiar with the area, and I didn't know by memory where the nearest adult store would be located. We relied on my Maps app to take us to our destination. However, it didn't take us to a place where we could buy as many toys as we could ever want. It instead told me to go into a freaking military base. I ended up pulling up to the gate area where some guys in camo asked us if we had a visitor's pass. I was honest with him and told him, I have no idea where I am, I'm just following my Maps program, and it told me to come here. The young man then asked me where I was going. I tried to respond with a vague answer, but he kept persisting. I'm a bit too awkward to tell this dude where two young lesbians were trying to go. Eventually, he asked, are you looking for the arts and crafts place nearby? We said yes, and that answer was good enough for him. We turned around and found the right place, which was closed anyways. Story 15. Guess it's time I told some of my stories too. Back when I was in college, I needed a job and no one would hire me because I lacked experience, and at that time, if you applied to McDonald's, you had over 50 other college students applying, so I couldn't get anything. Then I saw an ad in the papers, store clerk. I went to apply, and yes, it was my first time stepping into an adult store. Got hired right away. They paid $10 hour plus commission. That was great for the time. It was early 90s. Story 1. Had a guy come in from the bar next door complaining to me about how he just couldn't get laid. He's ranting to me about how in Mexico, he'd only need to spend $20 to get laid, but not here. Kept going on and on. So I said, there's got to be at least one girl who would sleep with you, right? Just keep looking. Then he looks at me seriously and says, no, I'm talking about guys. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gay. I hate gays. I'm just into guys. Story 2. Guy comes in, buys a pump, rents one of our video viewing rooms. They can rent a video and then rent a room, and I'd put the video on so they can watch it in that room. After the video was done, he brought the used pump back out and asked for a refund. Story 3. Guy comes in, looks at the dirty magazines. I'm watching him from the counter. After a couple, I see him stick his hands under his sweater and pulls it down. Clearly, he had hidden something under his sweater, so I go out and asked him to please put back the magazine. He kept saying he's not stealing any magazines, so I said, no, I saw you looking at our magazine, then put it under your sweater. Pull out your hands and let's see. His hands were still under his sweater too. Finally, he says, I was not ducking stealing anything, I was trying to hide my heart. Pulls his hands out, and sure enough, he's pitching a junk and nothing else was under his sweater. I had to apologize. Story 4. There was this lady who brought her 70-year-old mother in to get something. The mother was going out on a date. It's been a while since she's been on a date. They asked me, what's a good toy that a couple could use together? We had this thing that was a long and a vibrating on the other. It's been sitting on the shelf for a long time because it was so expensive. So I told them this was our most popular product for couples, and this was the last one. They bought it. On a side note, I was somewhat truthful since that was our only item for couples in the entire store. So obviously there was nothing for couples that would have been more popular. Story 5. Had a trans lady come into the store a couple of times with different guys. Then one time she comes in with this one guy. They go behind one of our video stands and she do BJ. No one was around and I was in shock. I didn't know what to do, so I just let them finish. Story 16. Not erotic store, but hotel. We had 2 new customers, a couple, check-in, etc. Was fine. After about 5 minutes on the room, they came down again as angry as possible. Apparently, there was a buzzing noise coming from something in the ceiling. So we sent the guy that watches over the building up there to check it. Everything was fine, but the noise remained. So we gave them a different room at the other end of the building. We checked it beforehand. No noise. 5 minutes later, they come back down and just started yelling. New room gets checked as well. Guy finds out the buzzing noise comes from their luggage. Looks inside, biggest toy collection ever. One was still running, hence the noise. Guy gets the other employees and shows them. We all laughed for a bit and then told the customers that the noise was coming from their luggage. At first they denied, then realized, became pale, started to stubble some excuses, to eventually come to the conclusion that they left the alarm clock in there and it must have gone off. After that, they became 2 of the best customers we ever had. Kind of funny what shame does to people. Story 17. Not mine, but a family friend that worked at an adult store where they sold toys. They had all the normal stuff you'd expect at a toy shop, including a selection of various sized plugs. Now, normally they didn't judge, but they had this novelty plug that was, as they said, I kid you not, the size of a dinner plate that everyone would laugh at and then buy something reasonably sized. Until one day, this stereotypical guy trying to keep a low profile came in and avoided everyone until there were no other customers in the building. Then he went up and said in practically a whisper, I want that plug there. Okay, which one would you like? The big one. This one? No, I mean, the big one. He bought it and left. And again, my friend was not one to judge, but even they were going, how the hell was this guy not crapping himself while walking? Story 18. We have a nice selection of XXL plugs, and they're not inexpensive. Start around $90. People almost always start telling me about how it's going to be such a good joke for their buddy. Isn't this a great gag gift? Gag gift, if I never hear those words again, it'll be too soon. I don't care why you're buying it. It's okay to put for yourself. That's what it was designed and produced for. I will genuinely forget you were there within 5 minutes if we just have a standard transaction with no story. But when you try to tell me you're dropping $100 on a gag gift for your buddy who just got divorced, I'll laugh and play along. He's gonna crack up. I love it. But it just makes me kind of sad. Live your life. Use lube. Please don't feel ashamed in my store. My entire professional life is centered around you having a safe space to buy and use these products. Just do your thing, Jerry. Please pay the machine and use your manners. Story 19. I used to work at an adult store back when VHS were still sold and watched the pretty rapid transition to DVD only. As DVD took over, male film was the last to really move to DVD. I'm not sure if it was a factor of the studios or the business since VHS was cheaper to buy, so our margins were larger with it, and the MGP tended to move in lower quantities. I worked third shift, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., so I got to see a lot of the late night people. Not so much large groups really, mostly gay men looking for hookups in the arcade room and back. We had a janitor clean in the morning. I wouldn't have been there if they didn't. Technically, I was supposed to not allow that, but I got paid $9 hours, so yeah, I had my fun joining in. I also got into the local kink scene through the people I met doing the glory holes, so I got a nice introduction to that as well. The store was on a college campus, so we would get girls coming in to look, obviously embarrassed. Despite being a guy, I could usually get them to open up a little and give me an idea of what she was looking for. I was often the store version of a bartender, reassuring them that all this was normal, listening to their stories if needed, and generally helping them feel comfortable with choosing something that was right for their needs, etc. We would also get groups of drunkest girls coming in, and they were always a treat. Having a giggling group of girls running around a store is the adult equivalent of a child watching a litter of kittens learn to pounce. I'll never forget the night I got to demonstrate several toys, including the rabbit, as seen on Sex and the City, to a group of 7 drunk ladies. We had male sex toys. Kind of horrifying, actually. We had an older box that was really beat up, so I took out the mold and demonstrated how several toys worked. The oops and of the girls and their anime eyes was hilarious, especially when they got to the rabbit and saw up close how it worked. Literally sold all the rabbits left in the store to them, and they all bought a different lube so they could each test one and find out which they each liked best. I've always wondered if gay guys did that too. Yes, I got phone numbers. Only one turned out to go anywhere. The others were all basically, I'm sorry, I was drunk and shouldn't have given you my number, for several reasons. I reassured them there were no hard feelings, and we even talked again when they came back for whatever new toy they wanted. I got asked out by a hot doctor. Apparently wearing my grandfather's wedding band on my right finger was code for married but gay and looking. I turned him down, but made it clear I was super flattered, just not gay. Sadly, men would come in and rent like 6, the max, videos every few nights. I finally asked what was up with all the films, especially since they were renting predominantly straight or lesbian and 1 gay male films. They were copying these to DVD and ripping the videos to burn onto more DVDs to smuggle back to Iran, India, since adult film was taboo in those areas. Apparently, that was their entire job. The fun times came to a halt when I got robbed at gunpoint. The robber was even a regular customer, and I pulled his card for the police when they got there. The hilarious thing was, he didn't get much money, but the 6 VHS movies he stole put him into a larger theft category and increased the min by, I think, 5 years. Dude wound up pleading out, and I never had to testify. Sentenced to 10 years IURC, although I don't know how much he actually did. After that, being alone overnight, I started getting bad panic attacks. I finally had to quit. Looking back, I probably had a case for workers' comp at the least. Not something I thought of at the time. That's about it. Hope y'all enjoyed the read. Story 20. One of my girlfriend's first days working at one of these stores. She had a woman come in wearing a full niqab, followed by a sheepish-looking husband. The woman boldly stated in a thick local accent, I need a sex toy because she points at her husband, doesn't satisfy me. The husband shrugs in a, that's about right, I suppose, kind of way. She says there were a few women who came in who wore the full head-to-toe Islamic clothing and usually wanted good push-up bras, etc., to try to give themselves more shape in them. Story 21. Not an employee, but my own experience. The first time I went to an adult shop, I decided to buy a small set of beads and some magazine. This was around 2010, so I had internet, just wanted something to aim at. I get to the counter and go to grab my wallet. Only it isn't there, so I tell the lady I will be right back, must have left it in the car. I get to my car, and there on my seat is my wallet. and my keys. I've locked my keys and my wallet in my car outside an adult shop. I go back in, explain what has happened. I ask if she has any wire hangers or anything I can use to break into my car. Only thing she has is a fly swatter, which she won't give me because it is her only one. She calls her boss to see if it is okay for me to take it. Her boss just laughs and says it is okay, as long as I replace it. I spend the next 2 hours trying to break into the car while I get to see the rainbow of people, some I knew, go into the shop. I did eventually unlock my car, pay for my items, and drive to the dollar store a block away and bought the counter lady a 3-pack of swatters. Story 22. Not an employee, but a customer. When I was buying a fist plug, I was asked why I was buying it. I said it was for a friend. I lied. Story 23. I worked at a Spencer's in Ontario, and as you know, they have an adult section. Some guy, I'd say he was around 19, picks up a pump and keeps staring at me. So I walk up and ask if he needs help. He, with a straight face, said, "I'm already huge. How much bigger will this make me?" After that, he proceeded to ask me out. Another time, I sold a toy in the shape of a lipstick to my fiance's mother in front of him. Story 24. A town I lived in years ago had an adult shop. It was always funny to go in there to buy films back in the pre-internet days of VHS and see others that you knew. You would always start doing this little dance with them, and you would pretend you were in there for one of the novelty gifts for a supposed birthday. They would do the same, they would be waiting for you to leave, and you them. This would go on for half an hour before one of you just gave up and left, given how comfortable pretty much everybody is with adult films these days. It's funny to look back when it was a bit shameful. Story 25. One of my first jobs was at a video store, VHS rental store, that had an adult section. I was not allowed to be in that section to restock, but I could rent them out. I was also tasked with calling up customers that had overdue tapes. Normally, this was fine. If you got an answering machine, you would just say, "You have an adult title that is overdue." Occasionally, you would get a woman, presumably a wife or girlfriend, and the name on the account was male. Do you try the "has an overdue tape" and hope she doesn't press for details? There was one time, however, where I did get the customer in question. "Hello, I am just calling to remind you that you have 5 adult titles that are now overdue." He cut in. "Yeah, which ones?" I tried, "The adult titles that you rented on." "No, what are they?" Looking at the list on the screen, there was definitely a theme. "I don't remember the titles, so I will simulate them for you." "Well, sir, and showing that you have name of films." "Oh, right, how much more a day it is to keep them?" "Czar a day." "Okay," he replied. "Goodbye," and I hung up. I then turned to my slightly older female coworker who was staring at me, caught between shock and laughter. "Why did you read out the titles?" "He asked me to." Now I'm starting to laugh. We would laugh about that phone call for a long time after. I tend to be a fairly broad-minded guy and was so even then while still being rather young. But there was something about the combination of being on the phone with the guy, the titles, and my coworker staring at me while I recited them that was simultaneously embarrassing and hilarious. Story 26. I didn't work in an adult shop. It was a pawn shop. The owner thought that it would be a good idea to start stocking a variety of cheap, dirty DVDs. Had some of the cheesy parodies with a bunch of other softcore. One day, a customer came up to the counter with a carrier bag in his receipt. I'd like to return these discs." Colleague asked if there was a fault with the discs. Customer said, "Nah, I've watched them and want to change them." Colleague said that we don't exchange stuff like that. Customer sod it, keep them then, and leaves the bag on the counter. Bag contents were rather suspiciously sticky. It was a fun place to work overall, but not that day. Story 27. I made a clerk spit her coffee years ago. I was in the shop and already a little uncomfortable enough as being a female. Alone in an adult store sometimes attracts the wrong attention, as it did this day. A man saw me looking at various items and decided to sidle up to me. Each display I looked at, he moved to join me, creeping closer and closer until our coats were touching and I could feel his breath on my neck. Exasperated, I started moving to a display at the front of the store, hoping the female clerk would notice my creeper, who by then was playing pocket pool, and tell him to get lost. No such luck. Finally, maxed out on the skeeve meter, I walked over to the sex toy. This really got his attention, judging by the increased effort he put into getting the toy in the side pocket. So I picked up the largest toy they have. It was pretty much the size of my arm, at least 12-13 inches long and as big around, ending with a closed fist. With my best, I'm dumb and female perky voice, I whirled around to him and said, "Excuse me, can I ask your opinion on something?" Creeper perked up. I'm sure he thought he was not only going to pick me up, but my imaginary Duff as well. "Sure, my little man Karen says he can't feel it when I duck him. Would you say this is big enough?" I didn't get to finish. Creeper left a dust train behind him in his hasty exit, and the clerk spat her coffee all over the counter, at which she worked and started howling. Story 28. Friend and I went to the local erotic goods store to get tons of condoms and individual lube. I was pretty shy and vanilla, so it was already a struggle for me to just be in there and not blush. While shopping, I mentioned to my buddy a new toy that I was planning to buy. Friend asked me how big, and I put my hands up and said, "Oh, like 14 inches or so." Right then, a large bearded man who worked there approached and asked, "Oh, hey cutie, you looking to get a new toy? I can definitely help you find something that size." I turned beet red instantly and started stammering, finally explaining that I was talking about something else. I don't think he believed me, because he tipped my friend a wink and said, "Okay, sweetie, you know where we are if you change your mind." Story 29. Okay, so years ago, a friend and I went to a shop to get the biggest toy we could find. So we're in the shop and we're critically assessing the toy selection. The guy behind the counter comes over and is super helpful. We explain we're looking for the largest, floppiest, most absurd rubber silicone toy they had available, but it had to be under $75. Now, I imagine it's probably standard practice to not pry too deeply into why anyone is shopping for a sex toy unless you're trying to be helpful. Clearly, he needed to know, because we kept saying it needs to really flop and bounce, like this thing needs to spring up in response to hitting something. So eventually he asks, "Okay, so what exactly are you trying to accomplish with this toy? That might help me find the right fit for you," he commented with a sly wink to both of us. Suddenly it hit us. It didn't occur to us until then how this looked. Oh no, we're not buying this for us to use on one another. We're gonna tie it to a rope, throw it over a tree, hide in the bushes and wait for cars to drive. Drop it on their windshields, then pull it back up into the tree after they freak out. This guy loses his crap laughing about this and ends up chipping in some cash to make sure we get the biggest rubber we can find, with a good set of balls of it to help ensure the rope stays secure. Those fundamentalist holes lost their crap over the toy on their windshields. That was 14 years ago. That friend ended up becoming my brother-in-law. So now whenever we want to mess with someone, just tell them, "Oh yeah, we go way back. We've even bought a giant toy together." Story 30. I was working at an adult shop a few years back. The hours were good and I'm very good at selling stuff, so the pay was very good. As a woman working there, I encountered lots of weird men that would say and do weird things in front of me while picking DVDs. One Indian guy asked me for a junk extension. Then when he was leaving and had already bought his thing, he said to me, "You a bad girl, aren't you?" and tried to slap me across the face. I knew where the camera was pointing, so I knew I'd gotten him on camera. The next time he came in, I alerted the manager and he called the cops. Had him arrested for trying to assault an employee. Not sure how that ended. Another really fat Mediterranean man would go every Thursday and try to lean really close to me on our glass tables. He would then start describing his most recent movie he had watched to me while making weird finger movements on the table towards me. I hated that guy. Even after I got a better job and left the shop, he would ask, "Where did the other girl go?" We once got our sex doll in the mail, and after we unboxed a life-size sex doll and started putting her on display, and guy shows up 20 minutes after. He immediately bought the doll for $3,000. He also bought some clothes, shoes, and a costume for the doll. Had his buddy help him load his new blonde sex doll into his car. Fastest sell of my life. Last one. A white super tall man walked in and asked me, "Where are your super small toy?" I said, "Right over there." I thought he meant something tight. He comes back and says, "Is this the smallest one you have?" I said, "Yes." Then he says, "I am looking for something way smaller than this," making a hand gestures the size of a quarter. He asks me for a smaller. Then he says he has a very super small, tiny micro junk. This guy was like 7 feet tall. So after looking everywhere and not finding anything that small, he was all frustrated and says, "Oh well, I've been let down before." Story 31. I used to work at a certain popular DVD rental by mail service in the call center. One day a customer calls in and we have a bizarre conversation. Customer, "Yeah, do you sanitize your discs?" Me, "Our discs are cleaned with Windex," or an equivalent of "they're dirty, especially if you report them so." C, "Yeah, but do you sanitize them?" M, "Like with disinfectant." C, "Yes." Well, no, a dry paper envelope isn't a very good environment for germs to flourish, so it's highly unlikely, given the turnaround time on any given disc, that you would get sick even if the last customer was. C, "You really should sanitize them." M, "Oh, okay, I'll be sure to pass that feedback along. Anything else I can help you with? Do you rent out adult movies? I think he might have been planning to use them incorrectly." Story 32. I work in an adult shop. I have for 6-ish years now. This just happened, maybe 3 to 5 months ago. A middle-aged woman, blonde, very attractive, huge breasts, asks me to help her try on some lingerie. Not that out of the ordinary. Sometimes corsets are hard to get on. Lots of lace work on some of them. But no, it was just a nighty type thing. Sheer black, and she just wanted to make sure it would fit her chest because of her aforementioned large breasts. We're not in the dressing room. We're at the counter. She lifts her top, bra included, and asked me to get her tits into the bust of the nightie. I obliged. She bought it and left me a $1 tip and said something to the affect of, overworked, underappreciated, and left. I have many stories, but this is the most recent and most awesome. That was completely out of nowhere. Story 33. Ooh boy. I used to work at Spencer's, which is like the house of all shops, not to mention the one I worked at was near a Navy base. Lots of lonely Navy guys would come in and buy things and talk loudly about how it's a joke or it's for a buddy and stuff like that, because myself and most of my coworkers were of the feminine variety. As if, one, we were there to try and catch dates, and two, we were ducking idiots. We know it's for you, we know you're lonely, and now we know why you don't have a girlfriend. On a positive note, we used to have this lovely group of escort that would come in and shop for lingerie together, as well as sex toys and bondage gear, and drop $100. They were always a super fun and positive bunch. They made the bullcrap. I went through at that store worth it. Story 34. I was the guy doing the buying. My friend and I are into firearms, and he recently got a bolt-action rifle with no scope. I hinted that I'd get him a scope for his birthday in 2 weeks. Once I get the scope, I see I can reseal the box. I head over to my local sex toy shop with the box, and say without hesitation, I need the cheapest toy you can fit in this box, preferably double-sided. Both of the employees took it professionally, but were trying to hold back their laughter. They asked why out of curiosity and said, it's for a friend's birthday. Part of me thinks they didn't believe me. Best $20 gag I ever bought, though. Story 35. I worked at 2 different sex shops many moons ago. My favorite people were the professionals. They basically knew generally what they wanted and weren't shy to talk. At one of the shops I worked at, we had a selection of toys, DVDs, and as I called them, BJ Cabin. These are stalls where there's a video screen that you pay money for, however long you wish to watch whatever selections of movies. Our store was purchased by new owners. New owners decided to take them down because they actually wanted glory holes. It was always sucky, haha, when it was your turn to monitor it back there and make change for people. One winter, the heating broke down, and we were without heat for 1 full day while waiting for the heating repair people. Owners made us stay open. The thermostat reader showed it was about 36F in there. Dudes were still going into the damn Jack Shacks, even though it was freezing cold. I swear that I should have had complimentary ice picks instead of baby wipes in the stalls that day. Story 36. You get everything from embarrassed to disturbing. To most people who couldn't handle a job like this, most daily encounters would probably seem ridiculous. Honestly, the worst thing for me was having to measure a 90-year-old woman who had a brain aneurysm with a dead left side of her body, who needed help trying on lingerie. I spent an hour in the dressing room with this woman, and as I tried to get her out of very tight lingerie, I was basically breathing in her skin dust. Worst day on the job ever. Story 37. When I worked at an adult boutique, we had some pervs and we had some regulars. My favorite customers came in once. They were a married couple on their 20-something anniversary. They specified that they had a great sex life but wanted to try something new. I said, if we can take that great sex and elevate it to mind-blowing every time, then we've done our job. They had some specifics. No vibrations, she didn't like it, no serious bondage, etc. So I walked them around the store and showed them the stuff we had that didn't vibrate, or that worked perfectly well without using that feature. I explained how to use them all safely and consensually. I also shared some stories of my experiences in a format. I put them at ease and they made me feel all warm and happy. They had so much love and consideration for each other that everything I said was a glance away from total acceptance or nothing. Story 38. I remember back in the early days of the web, before 2005, not sure when exactly, there was a blog written by a female employee of an adult video store. She had at least 50 entries and they were all riveting. Regular customers who would rent 2 videos and return them 75 minutes later like clockwork. Weirdos and crazies and all sorts of great stories. Story 39. If you ever have the chance to visit Akihabara in Tokyo, just go. There are like 3 or 4 shops there with amazing stuff. And it is an amazing experience. A Canadian guy in my hostel checked out the waters for us and then told us how amazing it felt. So I got one. This year I flew to Japan again and my time in Tokyo was well spent. I bought like 1 at the beginning of the journey and 2 when I returned. 1 for my cousin as a gift. When I came home to give it to him, I realized how much more relaxed and open the shop experience made me. Or it was just the fact that it felt so ducking amazing that I wanted every guy to experience it. Story 40. I worked at an adult bookstore while I was in college. Lucky me, it was one with a video arcade. Thankfully, I never had to clean it. Watched a lot of people on the DL. I usually worked nights and I'd covered a daytime shift for a coworker. I was at the register with my other employee. We never worked alone. And my 2 supervisors. A man about in his 70s came up to the register with a pocket sex toy. He said to me, "The only reason I'm buying this is because I can't afford something like you." I just stood there, deer-eyed. My bosses just chuckled. Chose to stay at nights after that. Few more. Ran into my 4th grade PE teacher. He never returned. Had a couple bring their baby in and couldn't understand why they couldn't bring the baby in. It won't see anything. Story 41. Obligatory, not an employee. My first time in an adult shop, I panicked and told the employee who had just asked if I needed help that I was just curious, and turned around and left. Story 42. Not an employee, but every time my boyfriend and I go to the erotic store, he'll try to embarrass me. When we find new thing we want to try, he always asks the employees the most specific questions you can imagine. Most of the time, I'm red like a tomato because of this. I know it's not the answer I've asked for, but I thought it is a funny story to tell. Story 43. Back in the early 90s, I worked at a video store. We had a huge collection of movies, everything from new releases to silent movies. We also had a huge adult selection. If it was legal, we carried it. Funniest, to me, story, a gay guy came in and rented a male adult video, and it was called Hole. We kept the cassettes in the back room for everything, and there was an adult film next to it called Holes, and it was regular film. The guy returned it laughing and said, "Yeah, my roommate woke me up and asked me if there was anything I wanted to tell him." I was working in suburbia, and I was surprised how many gay customers there were. This one guy was gorgeous. Great hair, great skin, smelled nice, great dresser, and the new counter girls would fawn over him until he rented a gay adult movie.